The cleaning cart caught the edge of the marble pillar at exactly 7:43 in the morning, and the sound it made, metal against stone, a clean sharp crack that rang through the lobby's early morning quiet, sent 2 travel mugs rocking on the top shelf. Amara Diallo caught one. The other went over the edge, bounced once off the tile, and left a thin crescent of cold coffee across the floor before rolling to a stop against the leather toe of a man's dress shoe. She looked up. Preston Halford, founder and chief executive of the Halford Development Group, 51 years old, and wearing a charcoal wool suit that had been pressed that morning at the hotel where he'd stayed specifically to be close to this meeting, stood very still. In the 2 seconds before he moved, the entire lobby seemed to pause with him. The couple near the reception desk stopped talking. A courier looked up from his manifest. 2 women in blazers, mid-step near the elevator bank, went still without quite knowing why. Then Preston looked down at his shoe. "Are you kidding me right now?" It wasn't a question. His voice was even, controlled, the way a voice gets when anger is being treated as a professional instrument. He looked at the smear of coffee across the toe of his Oxford and then looked at her with the expression of a man who has decided what category of person he is dealing with and doesn't plan to revise it. "Do you see what you just did?" "I'm so sorry," Amara said. She was already reaching for the cloth tucked into her vest pocket. "Let me." "Don't." He stepped back. "Don't touch it with that." He pulled a folded handkerchief from his breast pocket, white, monogrammed, and crouched to deal with it himself. And something about watching a man in a tailored suit crouching over his own shoe in a lobby full of witnesses seemed to concentrate his anger rather than release it. He stood. "That's my morning," he said. "You realize that? I have a meeting in 30 minutes that I have been building toward for 4 months. 4 months of preparation, and now I walk in there like this." He gestured at his shoe, though the mark was barely visible. "Where's building management? Who oversees this crew?" "I do," Amara said. "I manage this shift." He looked at her the way people look at something when they're trying to determine whether its authority is real or merely claimed. The gray service vest. The small Daybreak commercial cleaning logo over the left breast. The cart loaded with supplies behind her. "Then you should know better," he said. "This is a premium building. The lobbies here operate at a certain standard, and that standard does not include equipment blocking the main floor during morning rush. What you're doing should happen before 7 or after 9. That's industry standard. That's basic." "Our contract starts at 7, Amara said. "The lobby clears by 7:50 on most mornings." The pillar. "I am not interested in your scheduling." His voice went up. Not a shout, but an elevation. Deliberate. Enough to carry to the couple near the reception desk. Enough for the courier, enough for the 2 women who were now pretending to check their phones while watching over the tops of the screens. "What I'm interested in is accountability. In the fact that someone accepted responsibility for this lobby this morning, and is currently failing at it, and seems not particularly troubled by that." "I apologized twice," Amara said. "You said the word," he said. "That's different." He looked at the cart, at her vest, at the expanse of marble between them. "I manage over 200 people. I've spent 30 years understanding what real accountability looks like. It doesn't look like this." He paused. "What I'm doing today will affect livelihoods, jobs, families. That's the scale of what I'm managing. And he gestured at the cart, "you're managing a mop, and you can't keep it from hitting people." The lobby was completely silent. Amara looked at him. She had worked enough early morning shifts to recognize what this was. Not a man in genuine distress, not someone having a terrible morning, but a man performing distress for an audience. The raised voice was not about the coffee. The raised voice was about making sure the people around them understood the hierarchy he was operating from. She had encountered this posture before. She knew what it cost to fight it, and what it cost to let it go. And she knew precisely which cost she could afford right now at 7:43, 30 minutes before the most important meeting this man would ever have. "I hear you," she said. "I'm sorry about your shoe." She turned back to the cart, righted the remaining mugs, repositioned the cart against the wall well clear of the morning path, and continued her work. Preston stood for a moment, watching her back. The lobby watched him. The moment stretched just long enough to be uncomfortable for everyone except Amara, who had found her rhythm again and wasn't looking back. He turned to the 2 associates standing 4 feet behind him. Kieran Foss, senior 38, 6 years with the firm, had his eyes on the floor. Ben Traor, junior 26, quiet in every room he'd ever been in, stood very still, his hands at his sides, his face revealing nothing. "We're late," Preston said. He crossed the lobby. He stepped into the elevator. He pressed the button for the 34th floor and watched the doors close over his own reflection, and thought about the pitch. The numbers, the structure of the opening 3 minutes, the handshakes, and nothing else. He did not think about her again. He was wrong about that. The 34th floor of 1 King West Tower had housed the offices of Diallo Capital for 9 years, and in those 9 years the fund had operated with the particular discipline of an organization that understood its own reputation better than anyone on the outside ever quite did. It did not seek press, it did not court profiles. Its website listed 4 staff members, a mailing address, and a single paragraph describing its investment philosophy. Long-term, relationship-driven, character-first. That last phrase had been there since the site launched. Nobody who had dealt with the fund had ever made the mistake of treating it as decorative. What people in the industry said about Diallo Capital, when they said anything at all, was this: it moves quietly, it decides fast, and when it walks away from something, it stays walked away. Preston Halford had spent 4 months trying to get in the door. He'd sent 3 decks and 2 revised financial models. He'd had a former colleague call in a favor with someone on the fund's advisory board. He'd revised his executive summary twice and rehearsed the pitch 6 times in front of his communications team. He'd been told almost nothing about the specific composition of the investment committee, only that there would be 4 members, that the meeting was set for 8, and that the fund's managing partner, a man named Edmund Vance, would be leading the session. Preston had prepared for Edmund. He knew the type. In the elevator, he adjusted his cuffs. Behind him, Kieran quietly reminded him of 3 data points Preston had already memorized. Ben said nothing. The elevator opened. A young receptionist led them down a corridor with high ceilings and the kind of deliberate quietness that costs money to maintain. At the end of the hall, a glass-walled meeting room. 5 people already seated around the table. Preston fixed his expression into the one he used for arrivals. Confident, warm, slightly ahead of the room, and walked in. Edmund Vance rose first. Late 60s, white-haired, the handshake of a man who had been in boardrooms since before Preston could drive. "Mr. Halford, glad you made it." "Appreciate you making the time," Preston said. Edmund introduced the committee. A corporate lawyer named Daphne, compact and watchful, a pen already in her hand. A risk analyst whose name Preston caught and filed. A man from the advisory board he half recognized from a conference 2 years ago. And then Edmund gestured toward the head of the table and said, "Leading the committee today, Amara Diallo, founder of the fund." The woman at the head of the table had not stood with the others. She had a leather portfolio open in front of her and her hands folded on top of it, and she was looking at Preston with an expression that had no performance in it whatsoever. Just attention. And something beneath it that was completely still. Preston's recognition arrived the way it sometimes does, slowly, and then all at once, like a light coming on in a room that was already familiar in the dark. He knew her face. He knew it from 40 minutes ago when it had been below his, patient and contained, while he held his monogrammed handkerchief and told a lobby full of people exactly what he thought he was worth. His mouth opened. He closed it. "Please sit down," Amara said. He sat. The motion happened before he had consciously authorized it. Across the table, he heard Kieran exhale. Just barely, a controlled breath, half a second, and understood without looking that Kieran had recognized her before he had perhaps recognized her in the lobby even, and had said nothing in the elevator going up. He would think about that later. He would think about a great many things later. The meeting proceeded. Amara ran it. She was methodical and unhurried and gave no outward indication of anything except professional attention. She asked about the Halford Group's development timeline in the GTA. She asked about contractor relationships and how disputes were typically resolved on site. She asked about liability structure and how it had evolved over the past 3 fiscal years. Preston answered. He was good at this. He had spent 3 decades learning how to fill a room with confidence, and he did it now, and the room listened. And on the surface, everything was fine. Beneath the surface, nothing was fine at all. Because Amara Diallo asked her questions with the same expression she'd worn in the lobby. That calm. That patience. The expression of someone who has already seen what she needed to see, and is now conducting the rest of the meeting as a courtesy she owes to the other people in the room. She asked about his management philosophy, not as a talking point invitation, but with the specificity of someone who intended to compare the answer against evidence already in hand. Preston talked. He talked about leadership and culture, and the Halford Group's commitment to accountability. And he used that word, accountability. And something inside him registered the word and registered who he was saying it to and kept going, because there was nothing else to do. An hour in, Amara set down her pen. "I want to say something directly," she said. The room changed. Daphne stopped typing. The risk analyst put his pen on the table. Edmund looked at his hands. "I was in the lobby this morning," Amara said. "On shift with the Daybreak crew. They hold the commercial cleaning contract for this building. My mother started that company 22 years ago. She came here from Dakar with 3 clients and a van she rented month to month, and she built it into something that employs 43 people. She didn't rush it, she let it land. After she passed, I started taking shifts. A few mornings a month. Not because the fund needs me to, because I need me to. It keeps me honest about what work actually costs. Preston's hands were cold under the table. He became conscious of them. You may not remember what happened this morning, Amara said. I remember, he said. His voice came out quieter than he'd meant it to. Then you know what I saw. She didn't raise her voice, there was no edge in it, it was worse for that. A travel mug fell, that was the event. An accident. Everything that came after was a choice. She opened her portfolio and then closed it again without looking at what was inside. You told me I didn't understand the purpose of a service role. You told me that the people in this building were here to support people like you. People doing work that matters. You asked what I was doing, she folded her hands. I've been running this fund for 11 years. I sit on the Provincial Infrastructure Advisory Board. In that time I have made decisions that touched hundreds of livelihoods. Your word. And I was cleaning a lobby floor this morning because my mother cleaned floors, and because there is no amount of money or title that changes what it costs a person to do that work with dignity in front of someone who has decided not to give them any. The room was entirely still. Mrs. Diallo, Preston said. I want you to understand, I was under real pressure this morning. The stakes of this meeting. So was I, she said, simply, no inflection, no drama. Just the fact of it sitting in the room with them. I had a full shift to complete and a quarterly report due before end of day. I still apologize to you. He had no answer for that. He looked for one and it wasn't there. She turned toward the full table. The Halford Group's financials are sound, she said. The development model is well constructed. On paper, this was a reasonable candidate for our consideration. She paused. I won't be signing off on it. The fund is not proceeding. Preston looked around the table. The lawyer was looking at the window. The risk analyst was looking at his notebook. Edmund was looking at his hands. Not one person in the room moved to speak for him. Not one person reached in to soften the sentence or offer Preston a conversational exit. They let the room be what it was. I've invested in many projects over 11 years, Amara continued, and I've passed on many that looked good on paper. The projects I've regretted passing on, I can count on one hand. The ones I've regretted investing in all had the same thing in common. I knew something was off and I moved forward anyway because the numbers were too strong to walk away from. She looked at him one last time. The numbers are not too strong to walk away from. Preston stood. He wasn't entirely sure when he decided to, but he, and Kieran was beside him, and Ben was beside him, and someone was shaking someone's hand, and he was moving toward the door, with the specific quality of motion of a person whose body has understood something before the rest of him has caught up. At the door, he stopped. He had spent 30 years in rooms like this one. He had always had a sentence for the door, something that acknowledged without conceding, that left a thread open, that kept the shape of possibility alive. He stood there now and searched for it and came back with nothing. I didn't know who you were, he said, to Amara, to her back because she had turned toward the window. I need you to understand that, if I had known. She turned back. I know you didn't, she said. That's the whole point, Mr. Halford. He walked out. The door closed behind him without a sound. In the elevator going down, no one spoke. Kieran stared at the floor numbers. Ben stood in the back corner and looked at his own reflection in the brushed steel of the closing doors and thought about the woman in the lobby. About how she had said, I hear you, and turned back to the cart without a trace of performance in her face. About how he had stood 4 feet behind his employer and said nothing. Not in the lobby, and not upstairs. Not one word in either room. He was going to think about that for a long time. The Halford Development Group secured its capital 6 weeks later, through a fund based in Calgary, at terms that were workable but not what Preston had needed. He announced it internally as a strong outcome. His communications director wrote a press release that was technically accurate in every particular. Most people let it stand at that. He did not return to 1 King West Tower. On a Thursday morning in early October, Amara was back in the lobby on a 6 a.m. shift, working the east wall before the building came to life. She liked these early mornings. The particular quality of October light coming through the glass face of the tower, pale and slanted, touching the marble just so before the first commuters arrived and the day became what the day became. She was almost done with the east wall when the service entrance opened, and a young man in a navy staff vest came through, carrying a tray of cup sleeves and lids toward the coffee kiosk near the elevator bank. He was moving efficiently, the way someone moves when they've learned a job and settled into its rhythm. He set the tray on the counter and began to organize the supplies, and then he looked up. He went still. Amara had recognized him when he came through the door. Mrs. Diallo, he said. Ben, she said. Ben Traore stood at the kiosk counter, with his hands resting on the tray, and looked at her with an expression that was trying for neutral and not quite making it. He had the look of someone who had been rehearsing a sentence for a while, and was finally deciding whether to say it. I don't know if you heard, he said. I left the firm. I heard something, she said. About 3 weeks after the meeting, he looked at the cups in front of him. I'd been thinking about it before, honestly. But, he stopped, started again. I stood there in that lobby and I didn't say anything, and then I stood upstairs and I didn't say anything there either, and on the way down in the elevator I thought, if that's who I am in that moment, what am I building? He paused. I'm still working that out. Amara leaned against the cart handle and looked at him. He was 26, maybe 27 now. He had the particular tiredness of someone doing something harder than what they'd done before, and doing it without complaint and without apology. Studying for the bar, he said. Taking some shifts here while I do. He said it plainly, with no performance of embarrassment. It's honest work. It is, she said. A short pause. Can I ask you something? Go ahead. In the lobby that morning, he chose his words carefully. Did you know that he was coming up to see you? It was the same question Edmund had asked her 4 days after, over the phone. The question everyone seemed to want answered, as though the logistics of it would change the shape of what had happened. No, she said. I knew the company name on the morning schedule. I didn't put it together until I was in the elevator going up. She thought for a moment. It wouldn't have changed anything, though. That's not what the mornings are for. What are they for? He asked. She looked out at the lobby. The light had shifted in the last few minutes, coming fully through the east-facing glass now, warming the floor, catching the edge of the front desk, illuminating the ordinary, unhurried beginning of another day. A woman in a green coat was pushing through the revolving door, already on her phone, already somewhere else in her head. To remember, Amara said, that every person in this building is someone. The courier, the woman at the desk, the person cleaning the floor. Someone built their whole life to get to where they are today. Someone is working 3 jobs so someone they love doesn't have to. She looked back at Ben. When you stop seeing that, when you walk into a lobby and the people around you become obstacles instead of people, you've lost something, and usually by the time you lose it, you don't even know it's gone. Ben was quiet, then he said, he didn't know. No, Amara said, he didn't. But you did. She thought about her mother. About the van Fatou Diallo had driven before the sun came up, the building manifest on the dash, the city dark and asleep beyond the windshield. About what it had taken to build something from that. Not just the business but the steadiness, the refusal to let the world's opinion of the work determine her dignity in doing it. About what it meant to inherit that. Really inherit it. Not just the company but the understanding beneath it. I've known for a long time, she said. She pulled the cart forward and moved on to the next section of wall. Behind her she heard Ben return to his work. The sound of cups being sorted, the quiet efficiency of a person who had found his footing in something honest. The lobby was filling now. The morning arriving the way it always did, all at once, everyone moving towards something that felt urgent. Nobody glanced at the woman in the gray service vest, guiding her cart along the east wall. Nobody connected her to the name on the door of the 34th floor. Nobody stopped. She wasn't there to be noticed. She was there because her mother had cleaned floors before the world woke up, for years, so that the world could wake up to something clean. She was there because that meant something. Because the worth of a thing is not in whether it's witnessed, or what title accompanies it, or how it registers against someone else's measure of importance. The worth of a thing lives in how it's done, whether it's done with care, whether the person doing it brings their whole self to it, whether they hold on to their dignity when the room gives them every reason not to. There are people who spend their whole lives performing their value for the audiences that will confirm it. And there are people who simply do the work, every room, every morning, whether anyone is watching or not. Preston Halford had stood in a lobby and reached for power in a moment he thought was private. So had Amara. The difference, in the end, was not what either of them had built, or what their names meant in certain rooms, or how the numbers in their respective lives compared. It was what they'd each reached for when the mug hit the floor,